Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum and I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at a Valkyrie Arms M3A1 semi-automatic carbine semi-auto reproduction of the US M3 grease gun. Now, this was manufactured by Valkyrie Arms. This is a company that was founded in 1993 by Valerie Johnson, specifically to make semi-automatic replicas of machine guns. She was living in Washington at the time, and Washington doesn't allow ownership of machine guns, federally registered ones even. And so she figured, well, if I can't get the real thing, I'll make the next best thing. And that was the origin of Valkyrie Arms. Now, in 2004, it's about 10 years after the company started, she introduced an M3A1 grease gun reproduction, semi-auto copy. Now, the thing with the grease gun is they're pretty iconic World War II and Korean War US submachine guns, both the original M3, which has a big old charging handle on the side, and the M3A1, which does not. But very few of them got out into the collector's market. There are a lot of Thompsons available because the Thompson was sold commercially as well as militarily, both before and after World War II. And there's a lot of, there are a lot of those out there if you're interested in the Thompson gun. The grease gun, however, very hard to get your hands on as a civilian owner. So there's always been a significant potential demand for a semi-automatic version of the grease gun. Now, there are a couple things that you can already see that get in the way. One of them is, unless it's going to be registered as a short-barreled rifle, it has to have a 16-inch barrel. The originals had a barrel about half that long, and so this looks a little bit goofy. There's also an issue with the other way to do this would be to make it as a pistol with a short barrel, but then you couldn't have the shoulder stock on it. So Valkyrie offered them both ways. This is one of the carbine versions. Now, the other issues that come up that make the grease gun difficult to reproduce as a semi-auto is that primarily, it was manufactured as two big stampings that were stuck together. It was a very economical way to make a very large number of guns for the military, but it's not a very economical way to make a small number of semi-auto reproductions. So the internals all have to be redesigned. If you're manufacturing the stamping dies to make the guns in the same way as the originals is a very expensive process, one that nobody to date has decided to undertake. And there are not really that many parts. There are a few parts for these, original parts that came onto the market, but generally when the guns were disposed of, they were destroyed. So there aren't surviving receivers really. You get a few small parts. And in fact, a few of the original small parts did make their way onto the Valkyrie guns. I can show you. There are three original parts on these reproductions that I am aware of. One of them is the magazine release button. One of them is the shoulder stock itself. Note that on this particular example, there's a little tab down here that is a loading aid for the magazines, and that has broken off. And the third is the ejection port cover here. Now, on the original guns, this also acted as the safety. This tab projected down inside the ejection port and it would hold the bolt either forward or back. In order to use them on the semi-auto version, that tab appears to have been hammered flat, and this doesn't act as anything other than just a cover over the ejection port, but it does look correct. The markings here are in kind of the same place as the original, so Valkyrie Arms of Olympia, Washington. And on the other side, the Semiauto M3A1, caliber 45, and this is serial number 56. Now, US law does not allow semi-automatic open bolt guns. Those are considered easily convertible into machine guns. So to produce this, it had to be made closed bolt, which means the bolt no longer locks open. This is a replica of the M3A1 pattern, where the US government simplified the design by getting rid of the lever charging handle and instead just cutting a notch in the bolt. So you grab it with a finger, pull it back, and that's about as far as you need to go. On the full autos, you pull this back and it will lock open as an open bolt gun. On this one, you just pull it back far enough to clear the magazine. Right there. So far enough to pick up a cartridge, chamber a cartridge, and then it will fire from a closed bolt. Incidentally, I have had a lot of people ask if this doesn't this get too hot to hold after firing? And the answer is no, it really doesn't. The vast majority of the heat of firing goes into the barrel gets hot, the bolt is both somewhat insulated from the heat of firing, and it also has a lot more mass, so it takes a lot more energy to actually heat it up. And to the best of my knowledge, this becoming too hot to handle is really not ever a problem in the M3. There is a safety lever on the semi-auto version, which the originals did not have. The originals were, the safety, as I mentioned, was this top cover. On this guy, however, the gun has been redesigned to use an AR-15 fire control group with a hammer, and so we have an AR-15 safety on the side. As for the overall construction, instead of two sheet metal halves, stamped halves welded together, this uses a tube up top with a magazine well welded to it, and then an aluminum, a milled aluminum lower assembly. So this is held onto the upper bit by these two pins. This one is rather cleverly placed so that it really does pretty well duplicate the look of the button that was originally used to retract the stock on the full auto grease guns. This stock, by the way, is tack welded in place and does not collapse. In order to take the gun apart, the first thing we're going to do is take out both of these pins. They both have little detents to help keep them in place. And there's the other one. Now the lower assembly can remove from the upper assembly. This is held in place by tension from these two little tabs. Kind of a lot of tension, but once we get it off, this is kind of a clever way to do the recreation. They didn't quite exactly match the contour of the grip or the grip panels. You can see this screw down here. This is to duplicate what was originally an oiler bottle in the M3A1. This is just a blind screw now. It's for looks only. But this whole assembly is aluminum, and when I pull the trigger, it fires via that. This does mean you can get a really nice trigger pull because you can get a really nice AR-15 fire control group that drops in there. There is just a connecting rod here, if you can see that, that acts as a linkage between the trigger back here and the actual trigger section of the AR group. On the original M3s and M3A1s, the barrel is screwed into place and is pretty easily detachable, and the original ones will have a little spring latch down here that holds the barrel in place. The Valkyrie Semiauto has a little hex head set screw. So if we take that out, now I can unscrew the barrel. When I get this all the way out, the bolt, yep, there we go, is going to come forward just a little bit under spring tension. And I can pull this whole assembly. Well, all right, the bolt comes out first, and then we have a guide rod assembly in there as well. There's a recoil spring, and then there we go. There's the rest of the bits. So we're left with this, which is basically just a tube threaded at the front with a magazine well welded on, and then this block acts as both the connection for the lower assembly, and it has a very simple ejector inside. The magazine catch can come off once you've got the lower assembly off, but I'm going to not mess with that. The original M3 did have a pair of guide rods with springs like this. Valkyrie has added this chunk of rubber as a buffer that is actually kind of wire tied onto the back here. You know, it's possible that this was added by a previous owner, but I'm really not sure. There is a nice little cutout in this piece to accommodate that chunk of wire. And the bolt is pretty simple. Big mass. This is simple blowback operation, but we have a separate firing pin, a spring-loaded firing pin in here because this is hammer fired. All right, there you go. One field stripped Valkyrie Arms Semiauto M3A1 grease gun copy. I probably should have mentioned earlier, these do use totally standard surplus grease gun magazines, so that's nice. I don't know exactly how many of these were made, unfortunately. I suspect it wasn't all that many. Valkyrie was never a particularly high volume business. In fact, there were some customer service issues while Valkyrie was still around, which we won't get into in this video. We're just looking at this particular gun. So I think this is something that is primarily of interest to reenactors probably, or people who just really want some sort of stand-in for a true full auto grease gun, which is going to cost, you know, $20,000, $30,000 probably. So for that, it's an interesting option. If you'd like to know more about this particular one, you can find it on Rock Island's catalog page. If you just want to know more about Rock Island in general, you can find them in the description text below. I have links to their Instagram page and also their YouTube channel. Plenty of cool stuff over there to check out. Thanks for watching.